Well, hello and welcome to Insight with Political Tours, the travel company led by reporters around the world. With the Trump administration signaling a retreat from Europe, NATO is arguably at its most vulnerable since the Cold War. Nowhere is the anxiety more acute than along the alliance's eastern flank. As the region's largest military power, much of the weight of that responsibility falls to Poland. How is it dealing with the challenge? We're joined by Kamil Calus, a senior fellow with OSW, a Polish think tank that specialises in relations with Eastern Europe. He's also our expert in Moldova and also on our upcoming tour of Poland and Lithuania. Hello and welcome, Kamil.
Hello, Nicholas. Hello to everybody. Good to see you.
Yeah, great to have you with us. I'm sad that you're not wearing a flowery shirt. Stripes for the order of the day, but there we go. So this is really a case study of how to deal with Russia. And we're talking about a country that's more aware than most of the threat by Putin and his forces. But also, I think we're going to discover the complexity. You can try and raise defense spending, but actually how you implement that and also assess the other threats is what makes it all complicated. To kick it off, this anxiety clearly isn't something new for Poland. It's been advocating a tougher stance on Russia well before the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Yes, that's true. I mean, from Polish perspective, Russia was always, and I'm talking about modern history of Poland, I'm talking about basically 20th century or even 17th or 18th century, but we'll not be going that far in history, either though, as you know, I like it very much. Russia was always existential threat for Poland. When Poland regained independence in 1918, just 2 years after that, we had our first serious war, and that was war with Russia, with Soviet Russia, not Soviet Union yet, but Soviet Russia, war which we managed to win. Then, of course, during Second World War, we were attacked not only by Germans on the 1st of September, but also by Soviet Union on 17th of September. Then for another 40 years, Poland, over 40 years, Poland remained in the Soviet sphere of influence. So basically, when only Poland, together with all the countries of former Eastern Bloc, managed to liberate itself from the Russian influence. When only Soviet Union collapsed, Poland started its sprint toward NATO and toward cooperation with Western partners, because we knew that it's the only moment, probably in contemporary history, when we can set up ourselves in this Western defense structures and be able to defend ourselves together with our allies from Russia. And we managed to do this just, it was incredible. I mean, Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, political system in Poland changed in 1989 and 1990, but Soviet forces left Poland only in 1993. And just 4 years after that, Poland joined NATO. Basically speaking, we did it very fast, and because we knew that if we lose some time, Russia would probably be able to step again on its feet and become danger. And this is exactly what happened. This is why Poland was advocating all the time within NATO to increase spending, to reinforce the eastern flank. And those calls were usually falling on relatively deaf ears for many years. It changed, or it started to change in 2008, right after Russia invaded Georgia. And then definitely it changed after 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea, attacked eastern Ukraine. I'm talking about Donbass, obviously. So we were on the same in the same position all the time.
Okay, let's just have a look at some of the figures here. If I can, I'm going to produce something which is written in Polish, so you're going to have to explain us. And this is much more recent.
Yes.
So you can see it. For some reason, I can't actually see it. No, I can actually see it here. So I mean, this is the PKB stands for percentage of GDP. So already, before 2022, you were above 2%. You were already spending a lot on defense already.
Yeah, we increased our spendings definitely. I mean, over 2% after 2014, and we were trying to keep it. Even
so
before that.
So permit me for saying this. So for a while, the Germans and the French were sort of prevaricating and saying, we can work something out. And they, despite the fact that Russia had already occupied a large amount of Ukraine, the rest of Europe didn't seem to have got the message, or rather, the rest of NATO didn't seem to have got the message. But Poland clearly had.
Yeah, that's true. And let me just add one more thing. It's not only about military, it's also about other hybrid issues like energy, for example. This is why Poland was so critical towards Nord Stream projects. So project of building this pipeline under the Baltic Sea to Germany, because we, from the very beginning, perceived this as an instrument of Russian political influence. And we turned out to be right. So basically, yeah, we increased our spending over 2%. We started quite large, not as large as today, but already large military programs. We bought F-16s. We started to acquire Patriot missiles. We kind of initiated modernization of our tank battalions and so on and so forth. So yeah, but the huge shopping spree, really a real shopping spree, started after full-scale Russian invasion in 2022, when we jumped from, I think, 2.5% to today 4.7% of GDP. And let me just add that Polish GDP, of course, it's far smaller than German or US, but it's still on the rise. We are, since 90s, we actually never really hit recession, just once, I think, during COVID time. So we've got around 4% of GDP rise each year. So it is something. And now we are basically modernizing everything, as you can see on this on the screenshot.
This actually is not, and I think the interesting thing about this is, with a couple of interesting things, this is not up to date. Some of these numbers have exceeded that now. So
and there are no, for example, there's no F-35 here, but it's not here because we actually signed a contract for 32 F-35 aircraft before full-scale invasion. So that's the reason. Those are only shoppings we started making after in full-scale invasion of Russia.
So just to pause, I mean, I think the interesting thing here also is the range of sources. So obviously you've got, Abrams tanks, 96 Apache helicopters coming from the US, but the South Korean arms industry, which I was vaguely aware of, but I didn't realize how developed it was. 980 K2 tanks, 648 self-propelled howitzers, and they're also going to be developing a factory that produces munitions for those howitzers. UK-made air defence batteries, UK-made, that's not on this list here, 3 UK-made frigates, and then South Korean combat aircraft, as well as the US ones there mentioned already. So I mean, I think it's interesting that there's a diversity of sources as well as the sheer numbers that are taking place. And if I come on to, I'll just, this is from The Sun, that scurrilous English tabloid, which shows you the sort of projected level of the European of Polish armed forces. So 300,000 troops, largest tank contingent, I think, in Europe, and larger than Germany's possibly. Armored vehicles.
Definitely.
Fighter jets, the whole lot. So obviously not in terms of naval terms, but across the board. Go on.
So let me just jump in. We decided to buy this equipment from different sources, not because we really wanted to, but because we hadn't had really any other chance. We wanted particularly tanks, some artillery, and aircraft as soon as possible. Why? Well, not only because we felt threatened by Russia after invasion, but also because we actually sent significant part of our equipment to Ukraine in order to help Ukraine defend itself. So we kind of disarmed ourselves in those first year of invasion. It wasn't really controversial in Poland. And let me be blunt, we kind of thought that this equipment was meant to fight Russians anyway. So it was better.
And, I mean, it seems a really obvious thing to say, doesn't it? If they give you Ukraine, they get to Poland, so you might as well give the kit you can to Ukraine to stop them from getting there. I mean, it's such an obvious thing to say. Yet other European states are tripping themselves up over the
Yeah.
idea of giving that weaponry away because we needed to defend ourselves. Well, I mean, flip, there are people fighting this battle for you already. Why not kit them out?
Exactly, exactly. Plus, this was most of this equipment was Soviet-made or Polish, but on Soviet license. So Ukrainians knew very well how to use those tanks, how to use those planes, because we also sent like half of our fleet of MiG-29s to Ukraine, half of our tanks, 1/3 of our infantry fighting vehicles, and so on and so forth. So we needed some replacement, and we needed it right away. And we were simply looking around the world, and we were asking, where can we get this stuff as soon as possible? Normally, you are signing a contract and you're waiting for 5 to 10 years for this weapon or equipment to be produced and then sent to you. And then it turned out that with Korea, the situation is actually quite different, because Korea is able to send you an equipment which they already produced, even for their own military, which is totally new, but and they can send it to you and then produce something for themselves. So it allowed us to relatively quickly acquire at least some tanks.
Yeah.
The same, it was the same with US, and with at least a part of Abrams tank we acquired from US. I think it was around 150 or 160 tanks from US. Similar situation happened with FA-50s, so those jet planes. So we were buying off the shelf, as they say. Problem with this was that we overpaid, but unfortunately we had to. I mean, we had to get this equipment on the ground. But of course, at the same time, we signed long-term contracts, particularly with Koreans who simply, they've got robust and very well-developed military-industrial complex for obvious reasons, right? I mean, they need to be able to defend themselves from North Korea, maybe China, and so on and so forth. They're in a very vulnerable position. And this is why we're still waiting for, I think we've got around 300 tanks already ordered from Korea. I'm talking about K2 tanks, so-called Black Panther, and we are waiting for another 700 from them. So yeah, this is why we were simply looking all around the place and trying to find out some allies and partners.
So we're going to be with you on this upcoming tour, and we're going to be looking at obviously defence procurement and just the actual whole rearmament process. We're all, in a moment, in a bit, we're going to talk about total defence, the actual idea that your whole civilian population needs to be involved in this. This is something we've looked at already in the Baltics. We've seen troops, reserve troops training, I think, in all 3 countries. It's a model that was started by Finland, because Finland's got this massive long border, and the question there was, how do we defend it? And the Baltic states have looked at this concept and said, right, our societies need to be prepared for it. And I know that's something Poland's looking at. So we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to draw just to familiarize people with the geography here, because I think there's one area we're going to look at, which people may or may not have heard of, and that's the Suwalki Gap. So why is Poland in a strategically critical position? Tell us about the Suwalki Gap.
Yeah, so you can see the map here, and you can see Suwalki Gap, this very vulnerable point from the geopolitical and military perspective. So to the right, you can see Belarus. Belarus, which is basically a vassal state of Russia right now. Belarusian military is merged with Russian one. It's basically under Russian command. So you should treat this region as part of a Russian-controlled, military speaking and politically speaking as well, territory. And to the left, you can see Kaliningrad. This is a region which before Second World War used to be part of Germany, of Eastern Prussia, and now it's part of Russia. And because during Soviet times, Lithuanian Soviet Socialist Republic was kind of dividing this territory belonging to Russian Soviet Socialist Republic and Russia proper. Today, Russia finds itself in a very peculiar situation where part of its territory is not directly connected territory-wise with mainland. And it's not, it's very unique region also because it's highly militarized. It's a seat of one of the seats of Russian Baltic Fleet. Russia almost certainly is keeping nuclear weapons there. It's not really very densely inhabited. I don't remember right now, but I think it's around 500,000 people only. It's slightly bigger than Transnistria, speaking about Moldova. But for obvious reasons, Russia may be willing to connect territory-wise with this region, and as you can see, it's not really that far away. It will be enough to just cross Lithuania and get there. And Russia will not only get direct access to its military forces there, but also will cut off Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia from its allies to the south.
Kamil, just to play devil's advocate, it sounds like an incredibly crazy thing to do. I mean, we know the geography a bit. If you look at that area, it's incredibly marshy. Getting tanks across it, just the actual physical effort of doing it is very, very tough. But surely, if they did that, it's World War III. I mean, it's just and it's what the Baltic states worry about, because they're going to be cut off from their allies and the rest of in Western and Central Europe. So this is talked about again and again and again. But if the Russians and the Belarusians were really going to do this, I mean, there's no going back. It seems an absurd idea.
Before presidential elections in US, the recent one, we would say the same. Now we're not that sure. Not because of Trump himself, but because we're simply a little bit afraid that Russia may be willing to test Trump's commitment to its NATO partners. We're not talking about full-scale war from Russian perspective, but let's imagine that Russia will try to as Biden once said, committed this minor incursion, right? They will simply cross the border or try to reach through those marshes and swamps, try to reach Kaliningrad, or maybe just, move their forces a little bit toward Kaliningrad through Lithuanian territory. Maybe they will take over some village, maybe some smaller town, and just stand there and wait to see what will happen. And we're not really sure what would happen. I mean, we know what we will do. We know. So
it's basically what they're trying to do is prove that NATO is inadequate, that European defenses are not up to the task, and that they can, just by the idea of getting away with it, walking across the border, making a small incursion, they can say, right, well, that's it. Europe's NATO isn't really united. America doesn't really have NATO's back. It is not worth the piece of paper it's written upon, this alliance. It's
exactly. I mean, we are not really thinking that Russia will decide to go through Suwałki Gap, through Poland, but they can do this through Lithuania. Lithuania is smaller. It's really one of the smallest countries in the European Union and in NATO. And for some politicians, for some societies within NATO, well, the question may appear, is it really worth going for full-scale war for this 2.4 million people country? And particularly if Russians will be trying, not to cause too much damage or civilian casualties, it will be more like a political power play. We'll see what would happen, right? So this is what we are worried about. And this is what, of course, Lithuanians are worried about. I remember just a couple of weeks ago, there was this article in one of the largest Polish newspapers, daily newspapers. It was done actually by my colleague, was speaking with people from one of the ministries in Lithuania. And they literally said, of course, not under name, but they literally said that they are shitting their pants. Thinking about it, because this is a thing which, and it was quoted in a newspaper. I mean, this is the level of fear, which is totally understandable when it comes to Lithuania. It's a really small country with a very small military. They can only basically count on their allies. Of course, they can try to defend themselves for a couple of days, but alone they will not be able to do this. And Russia, under current geopolitical situation, may be tempted to actually check NATO integrity.
In a moment, we're going to start taking people's questions. I can see a couple already coming through. Please do put the questions down in the Q&A box or just raise your hand, and then you can put your questions directly to Kamil. We're going to circle back in a bit and talk about the complexities of actually preparing, military defense. But I want to talk about the other threats. We saw that long border with Belarus. What's been happening there? I think you're well aware that the threat is hybrid, but it's also political. So let's talk about the things that Russia gets up to generally, starting with that border with Belarus.
Yeah. So when it comes to border with Belarus, I mean, Polish-Belarusian relations are not good, to put it mildly, for the same reasons that they are not good with Russia. I mean, as I said, Belarus is a vassal state of Russia, and Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus, is perceiving Poland as basically an enemy. And since 2021, I think, during COVID time, at some point, Belarus, together with Russia, or under Russian command, started to organize migration refugees, so-called refugees route. And they were simply bringing people from Middle East, from some African states to Minsk, capital city of Belarus, and then they were organizing transport.
Free flights, and then transport to the border, shipping them over.
Transport to the border.
This is not a new. So Libya did this under Gaddafi. It's a sort of political pressure, but a real nerve, a raw nerve for Poland, which is actually, in terms of anti-migrants and xenophobia, those sort of right-wing elements are pretty. It's a hot topic in Poland.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it always creates political tension within the country, because it's easy for the opposition party to attack government, which is not able to control its borders, whoever is at power at that point. On the other hand, there are like NGOs which are trying to protect those migrants, and it's causing a mess, right?
Yeah.
And of course, it's also causing certain. I mean, there were cases when Polish soldiers were protecting this border, or Polish border guards were either harmed or even killed. There was actually one case when one of our young border guards, he was a soldier, was killed by a knife which was installed on the stick, and it was provided to those migrants by Belarusians. We kind of noticed, and he was using this weapon, is this instrument, to attack border guards through the fence which Polish authorities built already a couple of years ago on the border in order to protect this border better from this influx of migrants. But it's a very important issue, and it's kind of, it's not only causing political tensions in Poland, but it's also a very useful tool for Russians and Belarusians to send agents, to send some saboteurs to Poland, because within those groups of migrants which managed to actually get through, you can have very, very interesting people, let's put it this way. And we already faced those kind of hybrid attacks in Poland. We had this huge fire in Warsaw a couple of months ago, when a very big commercial center was burned down, and it was recently revealed. We thought that, but it was revealed, and it was proven that it was done and run by Russia, a Russian-run operation.
So these are, the questions are flowing in now. These are sort of kinetic measures. Both, you think about the Russian military threat, you're talking about hybrid threats, the use of migrants, whatever, or subterfuge, burning down munitions factory, using the GRU spies. That's sort of relatively hard stuff. But I mentioned the political threat. You and I know, we've been with you to Moldova. We've just been recent elections in Romania, in which a candidate who might have been far more sympathetic to Russia could have been elected. Let's think about Slovakia. Let's think about Hungary. Russia can change European policy, can actually have a far more sympathetic ground, and take things in a different way.
That's true. In Poland, it's a little bit harder for Russia. I mean, I cannot imagine Russia having pro-Russian party in Poland, or generally speaking, I cannot imagine a merge of openly pro-Russian party in Poland. There were attempts by Russia to do this.
So both the Tusk's government and the president's party, these are the two big opposing forces within Poland. They're united on one thing: Russia is the enemy, and we need to spend money on defense. And this is something we're united on. And there is not a significant population within Poland which could be pro-Russian or Russian-speaking, as there is in other border communities.
Definitely. We as a society and our political class as such, I mean, of course, there are exceptions, but generally, the mainstream, and I'm talking about like 80-90%, they do not perceive Russia as a reliable partner.
Because
which we
it's
can
information warfare. It's a control of stories on the airways, trying to stir people up in different ways by producing propaganda. Russian TV has got way more money than any of the countries. It's a third of Moldovan GDP just on Russian state TV. So there's something that many of those states can't compete with. But that's not the issue in Poland. So they don't have the same sensitivities that Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Moldova do. So, but I think it's an important point to make. Listen, let's take some questions. This session is 45 minutes long, so we've got to get those questions in now. Peter, you are up there. Peter, you came to Moldova with us. So you're familiar with many of these issues. Just open your microphone, Peter, and then just put your question to Kamil. There we go. Go ahead.
We're talking about the Sulawi Gap threat, but how about the opposite situation that NATO starts by making a blockade of Kaliningrad, both by sea and by rail? So
I think it's really good. I mean, I look at that and I think Kaliningrad is really vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to that, that's true. I mean, well, technically, Kaliningrad is, when it comes to particular military issues, is blocked from the ground side. It's not blocked from the sea side, and it's not blocked when it comes to access via plane. And I don't think we will do this unless, I mean, we as NATO will do this unless like real war will start. So when it comes to that, Russians are bringing up this idea from time to time. They are kind of accusing NATO, Poland, Lithuania of cutting Russia from its enclave or exclave in Kaliningrad, but it's really not true. I mean, it's still open. The people from there can travel. They can actually travel to Poland. I mean, border is open technically for civilians. It's open. So yeah, we could do this, and I may also add that. I will not get to the details, but Polish military from very 90s was very much oriented towards two possible directions, which they will have to fight and defend on. It's Kaliningrad and it's Belarus. So we do have our plans of dealing with Kaliningrad. And we do have our plans on defense from the Belarusian side. So yeah, it is possible, of course. But I don't think we'll do the first step, definitely.
Yeah, okay, great question though, Peter. Thanks very much. Elaine M, please open your microphone. Go ahead with your question if you can. Go on.
Yes, thank you, Kamil. I'd like to change the focus completely and ask, how strong is the peace movement in Poland, and what initiatives are being taken to seek a non-military approach? Given the size of your enemy on the borders there.
Do you think we can persuade Vladimir Putin not to invade other countries? Is that your thrust, Elaine?
Well, what is happening that we may not know about that you do, Kamil, to try and influence him in other ways? So yes, I'm interested in the non-militaristic approach, which in the end is going to kill us all, in my opinion. But there we are. Sorry,
I'm deeply cynical about this, and I would describe.
Yes, I know you are, Nicholas.
I would describe that as Merkel's approach, which is, you engage with Russia, you do business with Russia, you sign oil contracts, and you hope that Russia sees the benefit in that, and that it doesn't want to invade your country. But I think she was proven wrong and badly. But I don't think.
All right. Well, can we focus on the first part of my question then?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The peace movement in Poland.
It's not significant, to put it mildly. Generally speaking, Polish approach is, I mean, Nicholas described it very well.
Okay.
But it comes from our history. And we were trying to deal with Russia for better part of our history, not even modern one. And we came to the conclusion that if we will not be able to defend ourselves and to deter Russia by force, we will not be able to deter Russia at all. And what Merkel did, and in general what Germans did before, there was this all Wander durch Handel idea. So exactly, we will trade with Russia, we will sign all possible contracts, and we will civilize Russians thanks to that. And Russia will not be willing to attack us because it will be economically not feasible for them. But this is not how Russia works, unfortunately. Russia is not thinking in these terms, and we kind of know this. I mean, we already... we accepted this fact many years or decades before. So only, I mean, from our perspective, the only way to protect ourselves is to either be a member of a very strong alliance, or not even either or, simply be a member of a strong alliance.
If only NATO hadn't expanded eastward, you know, none of this would have happened.
Yeah, which is totally opposite from our perspective. I mean, we're quite sure that if we were not joined NATO, we will be today in the Ukrainian situation.
Yeah.
So, or Belarus, simply.
It's the West what done it. That's the argument there.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Thank you very much, Elaine. I know I'm resistant to your approach. So let's take another question, though. John Rigg. John, really good question coming up. Go ahead, John. Just open your microphone and go ahead with your question. If your microphone should be on the bottom left-hand side, I think, of your screen. There, go ahead, John.
Hi. Yes, very interesting briefing on the military situation, and thank you for that. But Russia's been using misinformation and social media to undermine the West, and particularly in elections. And I wondered if any other countries in NATO or Poland, perhaps, are using social media in Russia to present a different picture to the Russian people?
Very good question, actually. So let me start by saying a few words about not Russia, but Belarus. We were never very active when it comes to Russian media sphere, but we are trying to do this in Belarus. We actually, as a country, many years ago, we set up a TV station called Belsat, which was Belarusian Russian language TV station, mostly news station. It was broadcasted by our satellites, and it was available, thanks to that, it was available in the territory of Belarus, and they couldn't do anything about this. And it was showing, it was run by Belarusian journalists living and operating in Warsaw. I mean, some of them were sent to Belarus. It was quite hard for them to work there, but in general, yeah, we were trying to do this in Belarus, and it was relatively effective to an extent, of course. So when it comes to that, we were doing this in Belarus. We were doing the same in Ukraine, but not against, but with Ukrainians. So we were helping Ukrainian journalists to build up pro-Western media. We were co-financing and sending also some substantial expert support to their journalists to build media outlets such as Hromadzkie, for example, very popular internet TV station. But I think we never really thought about or really, targeted Russia when it comes to that. That's a very good idea, definitely. On the other hand, the problem is that it's really, I mean, Russian language internet is huge. It's vast space. It's, if you will add all people together speaking Russian under the influence, it's probably around 300 million people. So it shouldn't be Poland alone. Probably it should be better coordinated among not necessarily NATO, but Western democracies.
It's a really hard one, Kamil, isn't it? I mean, if you think about the American sphere of influence, you think of Hollywood, for example, you think of how we're dominated by American films. If you are a Russian speaker, Russian media dominates all aspects of your life. You're not really going to tune into, I mean, we can think about Radio Free Europe, we can think of Radio Liberty, we can think of, which have been American backed. And have been very successful, but they will only have a limited they might appeal to a small number of people. Yet the funding for that has been just pulled by the Americans, which is absolutely incredible. And Europe hasn't sort of taken, I share John's concern and your concern, which is Europe does not take its Russian citizens or its potential Russian citizens seriously. I think you can be Russian and you can be European, and you don't have to identify someone as being Russian as necessarily being pro-Kremlin. But the reality is, in terms of the information sphere that they live in, it is overwhelmingly dominated by the Kremlin, and we have to be able to provide alternative views. I mean, it's no doubt that Europe presents an enormous economic opportunity for those people who live in that hinterland. And I think many of those people, whether they're in the Baltics or Moldova, want and do go and work in the rest of Europe, and they can see the reality. They can see that they are better off within Europe, and that's an enormous pull. Still, they're very exposed to this Russian propaganda, and we just don't. There's not enough out there to compete with what's available on the other side.
Yeah, that's totally true. And we are. I mean, we are trying also to, when it comes to Belarus, it wasn't only about news, for example. We were also translating to Belarusian some TV series, the new one, right? Or even telenovelas, like soap operas, in order to actually build a kind of cultural influence. And it kind of works. And now we switch it. I think I'm not sure whether Belsat still exists. I think it was joined together with TVP World, so our international public broadcaster, and they've got their Russian language branch. So the idea is right now to actually produce content also in Russian, to translate some of our entertainment stuff to Russian. It's still rather directed toward Belarus, or, for example, Russians living in Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. Particularly, the problem is also that Russian media space in Russia is highly controlled by the state. And on one hand, and on the other hand, Russia media complex is very well founded, and they are producing a lot of content of good quality, entertainment-wise. And this is, for example, a problem which we've seen in Moldova, right? That people tend to watch Russian TV series because they are simply interesting. They look good in comparison to Moldovan or even Romanian series or entertainment programs. So it's very hard.
I want to circle back a bit. I want to come back to this idea of total defense, and I also want to ask about just rearming, the complexity and the difficulty of rearming, because it's not you don't necessarily you can buy the wrong kit, and procurement is a problem, armament production is a problem. We'll come on to that in a second. But what is total defense, Kamil, and why is it necessary when you've got a big border with Belarus? What is the vulnerability of those areas? Why do you go for this concept, and what is it?
Yeah, so we as Finnish people, as Swedes to a certain extent, and Baltic states, at some point came to the conclusion that we cannot rely only on the regular army, which of course is a core of defense and we need to be there, but we also need to engage people living on the territory that we will have to defend in this defense process. And this is why in 2017, Poland created fifth branch of its military called Territorial Defense Forces. And it's basically kind of institutional guerrilla forces. So you are asking people, mostly young people, but not necessarily very young, to serve in the military. They're not serving there on the full-time basis. They are attending training or exercise session every couple of weeks. They are being paid for that, and they are meant to defend this or work on this very territory they live in. And if war is about to happen, well, they will be acting as partisans, they will be acting as guerrilla. They've got the advantage of knowing the place. They've got the advantage of, being attached, like also emotionally. They are literally defending their families and houses, and they are relieving the core army, the main army, which then can operate everywhere else. The main army don't need to stay there and keep our borders protected. Of course.
So over and above that, I mean, what Finland does, and I know the Estonians are copying this model, is that this comes from the same idea that the Finnish border of Russia is just enormous. I don't know, it's 1,500 kilometers or something. I'm not too sure what it is. And they actually have exercises every year in different counties, and they have the local administration, local companies, the hospitals. They have all aspects of society that would be affected by conflict involved, and they actually run these sessions, and they actually send the managers off to training every year. So you go for a week's training, and you coordinate, so your other interlocutors within that area, and it's absolutely fascinating. So the Estonians are copying that, and I wonder whether the Poles are going that far, or are they just sticking to the reserve training? I know when we're on the study tour that we're going to be doing with you, we're hoping to see some of that reserve training taking place, but I'm interested in whether this broader concept is going to be implemented.
Yeah, so we're generally trying to emulate this Finnish model. Maybe we'll not be going that far. Definitely, we already have those units called territorial defense forces on spot. They are very well equipped. They are quite well trained, and so on and so forth. Of course, there are also plans developed with local authorities, local business on how to operate in case of war. How should they work together with them? And actually, they work very well during COVID, for example, right? When there was emergency, and of course, our territorial defense forces were also included in process of bringing some sanitary stuff and so on, or during migration crisis or refugee crisis when war started with Russia and Ukrainian migrants or refugees started to flow into Poland. They were also engaged. So yeah, we do have those plans. I'm not sure if it includes entirety of society, probably not, and I don't think we'll go that far. Yeah. But we are in a little bit different situation than Baltic states or Finland because we're a relatively large country population-wise. So we don't really need to engage all 40 million people in the defense process.
Got it. I see. Yeah,
but in general, yeah, that's the idea. I mean, we still hope to actually evacuate large part of our civilians from the territory which will be touched or endangered by military actions, but core military, the territorial defense force, they will remain there to fight and relieve our main core military from.
We've got about 5 minutes to go, so if anyone's got any more questions, please just do raise your hand by hitting the hand button or put another question in the Q&A box. I do want to come back just to the complications of rearmament. Donald Tusk, the Polish Prime Minister, has been very outspoken in saying, listen, with someone like Trump in the White House, Europe has to be able to do a lot of this by itself, even to the extent of saying that Poland should get nuclear weapons, which is an astonishing thing to say. But also there's an emphasis on rearmament, building up rearmament capacity within Europe and within Poland. But there's been some criticism about that. PGZ, the main state-owned armament company, has been pretty inefficient, and it keeps changing its director. They seem to sort of fall by the wayside after a year at a time. So can you tell us why it having committed all this money, the implementation of it is a bit rocky sometimes?
Yeah, and I would say that it's not only our problem. I mean, generally speaking, the entire region is having hard time with their military industry. We are very much lacking capacity, and I'm talking about region as such, actually the entire Europe, when it comes to production of ammunition, artillery shells, and so on and so forth. So we definitely need to do something with that. Romanians are trying to right now set up totally new factory, and Romanians were producing enormous amount of ammunition during Cold War, and they are trying to revive this potential. We have the same problem. It's of course related to a certain extent. It's related to political issues, but the problem is, generally speaking, that military industry is reliable and it's really bringing profit only with a scale. If you've got a lot of customers, if you can continue your production for many years and you can deliver and earn money for that. If you are a company in Poland or in Romania and you are delivering only to your own military or maybe this military plus one more country, you will probably not be able to keep up and to economically stand.
Yeah. So it's got to come. There has to be a bigger, much. I think we're in that situation already. I think there is this realization, and the small firms are going to get.
This is why we want to include entire Europe. Like this is what European Union, not NATO as such, but European Union should be doing and should be kind of coordinating this production of ammunition, because EU can actually do this, right? And this is idea of our authorities in Poland from both sides, really, of the political spectrum. We need to cooperate with US, and we want to cooperate with US, of course, very much. It's still our main partner, but we also need to be able to produce at least ammunition and provide ourselves within European Union with ammunition, which will allow us to defend ourselves for a longer period than 2 weeks. So that's
excellent. Well, let's take one more question from Peter J. Peter, go ahead with your question. Just open your microphone again on the bottom left-hand side. There you go. Go ahead.
How is the present relation with Lithuania developing? Your neighbors, but how they do
so
they...
Lithuania at some point used to be part of the Polish Empire, and so there are some sensitivities there. But go ahead, Kamil.
Yeah, Polish Commonwealth. We never use word empire for that. Yeah, but actually, we are right now when it comes to relation with Lithuania. They are the best probably in the modern history. We, for many years in last 3 decades, we had a lot of tensions between both of our countries on historical issues, on the Polish minority in Lithuania issue, and so on and so forth. But since now we are focusing mostly on defense, we became very close. Lithuania perceives Poland as probably the closest ally, which, first of all, is really interested in defending the Lithuania, because from our perspective, I mean, Lithuania is our close neighbor. If Lithuania falls, then we'll find ourselves in a very complicated situation, and we don't really want Lithuania to fall. So we are, for example, basically covering Lithuanian sky. So our jets are conducting air policing missions over Lithuania all the time. And on the political level, it's also very good, like really very, very, very good. There are very close and warm relations between Lithuanian authorities and our authorities from, again, both sides, be it central right parties, liberal parties, or conservative parties. There are no quarrels, and yeah, that's basically how it works. Former Prime Minister of Lithuania, right now he is European MP, Andriy Kubilius. Even I think it was during last Warsaw Security Forum, he was actually actively promoting buying Polish equipment and Polish military stuff in order to introduce it in Lithuanian military. So this is basically how it works.
It's fascinating that many of the Baltic leaders, politicians, are now among the most prominent in European defence and foreign policy. We can talk about Margaret Thatcher, we can talk about the EU special representative on foreign affairs, as they've got a dominant role. Kamil, we're going to be looking at all of this with you. We're going to be looking at defence spending, production, training within Poland. We're going to be meeting with Polish politicians on both parties, talking about their views on this. And then we are going to be travelling up along the Belarusian border at the Suwalki Gap, actually looking at that front line, looking at that border fence between Poland and Belarus before crossing into Lithuania, where we've been before. And again, hopefully we'll see Lithuanian reserve troops doing training before we have meetings with people within the government there. It's going to be an absolutely fascinating tour, a packed tour, and knowing from our experiences with you in Moldova, it'll be great fun too, and you'll be wearing hopefully some flowery shirts.
I will, definitely.
Great. Listen, thank you very much indeed, Kamil. Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for joining and for your excellent questions. Please do stay on the line to hear about our upcoming talks. We've got a sort of packed week coming up, and also to hear about upcoming tours. But my thanks again to Kamil Calus for his time. Thank you, Kamil.